The first voice came as a thin thread of sound that did not belong to any known language. It slid into old receivers on cold stations, brushed the edge of patrol ships, and slipped into the quiet between stars. Operators turned in their chairs. Computers tried to classify and failed. The voice was soft, almost polite, almost broken, yet it carried a weight that made people hold their breath. On Relay 19, a board technician named Varel watched a shaky line crawl across his screen. The line was wrong. It rose where it should fall, and it fell where it should rise, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. He leaned in, then froze as the station's pattern matcher spit out a shape on the secondary monitor. It was not words. It was a symbol burned into signal noise, the way a coin leaves a dent in soft metal, a circle, a bar. 3 stars arranged like a triangle with a line through it. Varel had seen it once in a museum image and laughed because it was only a story, the mark of Earth. He did not laugh now, whispered. No, and his voice shook. Across the galaxy, the same thread of sound found the same mark. On a mining rig, where the workers sang to drown the engine's scream. On a border watch post where the crew played cards to fight sleep. On a science barge where no one believed in anything older than math. The thread arrived, the symbol bloomed, and hearts began to beat in the strange, slow rhythm of a legend. Returning, the thread grew louder. It split into copies of itself. It bounced off comets and drifted through the ice of dead worlds and slid along magnetic fields as if guided. Then it said words, machine translated, not all at once, but with painful pieces that felt like teeth breaking. The words came in a voice that was tired and dry and still proud. Distress. Terran. Medical. Attacked. Coordinates. Please. On the flagship of the Draxon Patrol, Commander Ilex went very still. He had spent his youth in quiet halls reading military history and telling himself he was too smart to fear ghosts. He had grown into a careful man who knew that myths feed on careless minds. He wanted to be careful now, but the voice kept repeating. And each repeat carried the old mark, and the edges of the symbol seemed to shine. He ordered all channels clear. He ordered his navigator to plot the coordinates hiding under the static. The navigator's spined hands tapped, and then paused. The numbers pointed not to a system the Draxon watched, but to a place beyond their maps. A cold and empty slice of black where light took the long way around. Empty, said the navigator. No stations, no colonized rock, no trade. Then. Why does it call? Lex said. But he already knew that question had no safe answer. The Galactic Council learned of the thread within the hour. Messages piled upon messages. Some were excited, some afraid, some angry. The council hall was a great bowl of stone and sky, wide enough to hold a storm. It filled with bodies and with the quiet buzz of translators. Banners hung heavy on the walls, victories, treaties, laws that had stood so long the paint on them had learned to sleep. For a moment no one spoke. They played the voice. They watched the symbol bloom in the air, larger than the banners, sharper than any law. It looked simple. It felt like a blade. Humans, said Chancellor Soreth, cool and slow, his whiskers like white wire, fable told to frighten children. A warning told to save them, someone answered from the tiered seats. A scholar rose. She wore a coat of soft dark cloth, the kind that says, I carry old things. Her eyes were wet. I have read the old reports, she said, and I have read the ones we do not talk about. There were fleets that never came home. There were worlds that burned green and did not stop burning. Always at the edges of those stories there was this mark. This is a trick, said an admiral with iron rings in his ear, the rings clicking like teeth. A rival wants to frighten us, so we break our own feet running. Trick or not, said Soreth, the coordinates are real. Something calls. From that place, we will send scouts. They voted with lights. The bowl of stone glowed and dimmed like a breathing thing. The decision came back the way a knife comes back clean. Scouts would go, quiet ships fast, clever, empty enough that the loss would hurt but not break. 3 scouts left at once from 3 peoples, who did not trust each other but did not want to be left behind. One was the Draxon cutter Sybil, sharp-nosed and proud, its crew brave because they had to be. One was a Vey shimmerboat with hulls that bent light like water. One was a little sorry craft flown by two cousins who talked too much because talk. Was courage wearing a thin coat? They rode the coordinates into the dark. Behind them, the council argued. In front of them, something moved where nothing should move. The starfield warped around a mass that did not show on thermal. It was like watching heat rise off stone while an ice wind blew. Light bent at its skin. Gravity made a soft sound that only machines could hear. The Sybil sent back a picture. It showed a curve like the side of a world, but too smooth and too perfect, with seams that looked like the edges of a closed eye. The picture broke into static before it reached the side of the bowl. The scream that followed did not belong to a person. It belonged to metal. The Vey shimmerboat spoke once. We were being scanned. Then a voice came not from the boat, but from the council hall itself, as if the air had learned a word. It was a simple word. It was a question. Identify. The word was in every language at once and in none. The word shook the stones. Then silence ate the rest of the boat's report. Sorry cousins sent laughter, thin and hard. It wasn't joy. It was the sound that comes when fear turns foolish. There is a shadow, one said, is city long, and it looks at us without eyes. Their craft turned to run. The shadow did not chase. It merely shifted, and the cousin's engine redlined and died like a lungful of smoke. The council room watched 3 green markers turn gray. The admiral spoke at once. The hall fell into a loud mess. Sorith banged the old gavel, and the old sound filled the bowl, and everyone remembered they were supposed to be brave. Tricks break when you do not play, the admiral with iron rings said. We will scrub the coordinates from public channels, we will mark the area red, and we will not send another foolish soul. Or we could ask who bleeds in that message, the scholar said, voice soft and precise, and who attacked a Terran. Medical ship. That word was clear. Medical. Lies wear white coats, the admiral said. Truth does too, she said back. Sorith closed his eyes because he had to. He had held that old gavel many years. He knew when laws mattered, and when fear made paper of them. He opened his eyes and found a compromise with sharp edges. We will send one more, he said. Not a scout, an envoy. Fast, loud. With a white flag so large the dark can read it. The floor murmured. The admirals shook their heads, but the scholar bowed her head as if a weight had risen from her shoulders. Let me go, she said. Let me speak to myths reasonably. Ships. Speak, the admiral said. Guns translate. While the council fought, the thread of sound kept moving. Civilian markets picked it up. Pirates picked it up and dreamed of raiding legend. Farmers in cold valleys picked it up and shut their doors because old stories say you should. Children learned to draw the mark with careful hands and hid the drawings from their elders, and then they did not hide them because hiding suggests shame, and they did not feel shame. They felt the clean thrill of a storm still very far away. On Relay 19, Varel did not go home. He listened. The voice came, in fragments, saved each fragment, and played it again and again. He could not fix the breaks. He could not force the missing words to grow. But he could arrange what he had, and he could listen well, and sometimes listening is a kind of prayer. He built a sentence from shards. Ran medical. Ship under attack. Please, any. Friendly. Respond. Coordinates. Medical. Oath, we do not fire. We the last word never completed. It wavered and frayed and ran out like a thin cloth torn by a hand that did not mean to tear. Varel put his head in his hands and thought of pictures from old museums. Humans with small eyes and flat teeth and sad smiles, standing in groups and holding tools. And behind them, ships like mountains with lights like dawn. He realized he was not breathing. He made himself breathe. The envoy the council sent was named Hesta's Promise. And the name was a lie, because no ship can promise what the dark will do with it. The promise was quick and elegant and painted in clean lines of white and blue. It carried translators and gifts. It carried a single old admiral who had learned when to lower his voice and a young captain who had not. It carried the scholar, because she did not ask permission twice. In the hangar, Sarith met them and spoke softly. "If this is theater," he said to the admiral, "play your part well and come home." "If this is war," the admiral said, "we do not have home." The promise burned for the coordinates. Crowds came to watch it go because crowds always come when something dangerous leaves. Some cheered because cheering is lighter than fear. Some prayed. A child lifted a handmade sign with the Terran symbol drawn crooked and bright. The child's parent tried to lower the sign and failed because the child had the strong grip of someone who has just learned a thing and does not plan to let go. At jump distance, the promise sent out a wideband hail. The scholar stood at the console and spoke in the plain voice of truth that has nowhere left to hide. "We seek the source of a distress call," she said. "We carry no weapons ready. We carry aid. We carry questions. We carry respect." The dark did not answer. Then the ship's lenses flexed. Gravity, like a held breath, pressed in and let go. Pressed in and let go. The starfield bent the way a blade bends before it breaks and then snaps back. A curve appeared and became a line and then became a surface. The surface had seemed like a closed eye, yes, but when it opened, what looked out was not an eye at all. It was a throat. A port. A doorlights walked along the door's rim. The door did not open. Something spoke without sound, and still the translation poured across the promise's bridge. The word was the same as before, but not as a question. Came as a test that remembers the answers. Identify. The admiral lifted his chin. "Galactic Council Envoy Hesta's promise," he said, and he fought the urge to add peaceful. Because he did not want to sound like prey begging the hunter's favor. "We seek the medical distress source." The word came again, heavy and careful, like a hand touching a face it has missed for a long time and is afraid to bruise. "Identify, Terran." The scholar stepped forward until the captain grabbed her sleeve. She shook him off and spoke anyway. "We are not Terran," she said. "We answer Terran. Do you carry wounded? Do you need aid?" Silence the size of a continent filled the channel. The promise drifted with half-thrusters, trying to look respectful and not look weak. On every screen that belonged to anyone in the galaxy, a counter ticked up because every station had learned to watch this place. On Relane 19, Arel leaned so close his breath fogged the glass. He whispered to the symbol like a friend he was afraid. 2 wake in the council hall. Lights wavered as if the bowl were a sea and a wind had found it. Then the door changed. Not open, not closed, but different, as if it had listened, as if it had decided. Something slid forward through the dark that was darker than dark. Its skin swallowed light, but along its edges, tiny marks glowed. Little white crosses, and simple. Circles and numbers that meant nothing until you felt them, and then they meant. You were small and alive, and someone far larger had chosen not to hurt you yet. The promise's captain's voice fell to a whisper without his consent. "Is that a ship?" He said no, said the admiral. For a heartbeat, he sounded like a child with a book in his lap and stars in his eyes. "It is a fleet pretending to be one ship." The thing ghosted past the promise so near the hall sensors cried. It turned its long side to show nothing like guns and everything like calm. A low tone stroked the promise's bones. The scholar pressed her palm flat to the console and imagined a pulse under it. "Terran Medical Armada," said the translation, slow like walking after a long sleep, under fire. "Broadcast oath, we do not fire. We carry hurt. Identify. Attacker." The admiral opened his mouth. At a speech made of smooth stones. He had practiced. He had words about neutrality and aid and law. He did not say them because at that moment the dark behind the Terran mass lit with thin needles of bright. They were not stars. They were shots. Something out there was shooting at the medical fleet. The Terran thing did not answer with guns. It moved. It moved like a wall learning to dance. It slid between needle-bright and soft-wounded ships the promise's sensors could not see and somehow still knew were there. Needles struck the Terran thing and died. The thing made no noise and carried no visible rage. It simply held its place and absorbed the night's unkindness with an old patience. On every world that watched, breath became a heavy coin no one could spend. On the council floor, the Iron Ring Admiral's hands closed without thought, and the rings clicked, the way so many small metals click when the large metal arrives. Who fires on medics? The scholar whispered. No one answered her, because no answer would help. A new transmission cut across everything, the promise. The council, Relay 19, market screens, pirate dens. The voice was not the soft, broken one. It was strong and clean. In iron, it did not ask, declared. You said we were myths, the voice said. You will remember our name. The promise's hull groaned. The admiral swallowed. Somewhere, a child with a crooked symbol on a sign cried without knowing why. The shadow beyond the stars shifted again, and far from the promise, at the original coordinates, where Varel's shaky line had first risen and fallen like a hidden heart, the void changed shape. Something vast that had waited very still let itself be seen for a single breath, just enough to mark the minds of all who watched. It was a silhouette like a mountain turned into anger. It was too large to comprehend and too quiet to ignore. It turned not toward the empty black where the distress began, but toward the bright center of the galaxy where banners hung and laws pretended to be strong. It moved. The promise's bridge lights flickered. The admiral said, very soft, stand by. To no one and everyone in the council hall. Chancellor Sarith raised the gavel and did not bring it down because there was nothing left to order. In 1,000 rooms, citizens put their hands on screens, without knowing why, in whispered words they'd never planned to say. Humans, the old myths, climbed out of their graves and started walking. Scouts had vanished. The council had argued. The dark had asked for names. Now the first answer walked the long road between stars. And fear learned a new shape. The story of humanity's return did not begin with triumph or blood. It began with a whisper that would not die, a simple oath spoken by ships that would not fire, and a shadow that moved when no other shadow dared. It began with the feeling that something was waking that should never have been allowed to sleep. It began with everyone understanding. Too late that fairy tale is only a word people use when the truth is too large to fit in the mouth, and in the time it took the promise to breathe once, the colossal shape beyond the stars changed course by a measure. So small it could be called a kindness, and so huge it could be called a decision. It was coming. The galaxy, busy and proud and full of old banners, suddenly felt very small. The galaxy did not sleep. Not after the whisper. Not after the shadow. Every station, every listening post, every pirate hideout, and every crowded market still replayed the fragments of that voice. Terran, medical. Attacked. We do not fire. Identify. Children repeated it like a song. Soldiers heard it as a warning. Politicians heard it as a threat. And the Galactic Council sat in silence, so thick that even their translators stuttered. But silence did not last. Silence never lasts when fear is louder. It began with a flicker on the long-range archives, deep inside the archive moon of Jelter. The archives were old, half-forgotten, kept alive by scholars who still loved dust and ghosts. Machines there hummed quietly, storing millennia of records. No one visited unless they needed proof of something long denied. On that night, a scholar named Ari felt the walls tremble. He thought it was a quake at first, but the tremor came from the servers, not the stone. He hurried to the main console, and on the dim screen he saw the word Terran written in crude, ancient DeLoYPHS. It was not typed. It was burned. Lines etched themselves across the screen in glowing heat. Then came the images. Not from the present, but from the past. Old recordings that had been locked and buried, files tagged with the word forbidden, the kind of history the council had told generations to forget. Ships, shaped like spears with glowing ribs. Cities burning under silent skies. Fleets vanishing into clouds of plasma. And at the center of every image, a symbol carved into holes and armor. The circle, the line. The 3 stars, the mark of Earth. Era's hand shook, tried to turn. The console off, but the console did not obey. The system whispered in a voice he had never heard, old and low, full of static. Archive breach. Terran entry restored. Confirm humanity. The scholar ran, but the images did not stop. They flooded outward into the networks, slipping through locked firewalls and coded barriers, as though the machines themselves had always been waiting. By dawn, every world near the Council's core had seen the forbidden footage, and the people began to ask questions their rulers could not answer. In the Council chamber, voices clashed like blades. "This is fabrication," shouted the representative of the Vey. "Some pirate trick, some parasite using old myths to divide us." "Pirates cannot bend archives," said the scholar who had been on the promise, her voice sharp with exhaustion. "That footage came from our own sealed vaults. Someone wanted us to forget, and now we cannot." The admiral with the iron rings slammed his fist on the stone table. The rings clanged. "Even if humans lived once, they are gone. Myths do not rise from ash. This is illusion." The chamber darkened. Without warning, the Council's central projector lit. It was not called by anyone in the hall. It played something on its own. A ship. Not like the promise. Not like the sleek alien vessels of the fleets. This one was ancient, scarred, its hull fractured, yet still moving with impossible steadiness. Along its side, words burned in a language almost lost, Un's mercy flight. Gasps spread through the chamber. They all knew the word mercy. It did not belong to pirates. It belonged to the Terran oath. The footage showed the ship under fire, surrounded by sleek alien attackers. No guns fired back. Instead, the ship kept broadcasting the same message again and again. "We do not fire. We carry wounded. Stand down." The attackers did not stand down. Their weapons tore into the hull. Sparks bled into space. Flames danced in silence, and the ship's voice faltered. Into static, the footage ended. The chamber filled with whispers. Some delegates looked down, ashamed. Others looked furious, demanding to know which empire centuries ago had dared to break the medic's oath. But most were simply afraid. Because the Mercy flight was not destroyed, sensors showed it had vanished into deep space. And now, with the new whisper, it seemed that the lost Terran ship had called once more. Chancellor Saroth's whiskers twitched as he rose. His voice was dry stones sliding over stone. Once, long ago, perhaps humans fought. Perhaps they burned worlds. But they also healed. This we cannot deny. Now a shadow moves with their name. You must choose: do we prepare for war against myths, or do we prepare for judgment from truth? The hall shook with argument. Some demanded a fleet strike into the dark to wipe out the shadow before it grew. Others begged for silence, fearing that even speaking the human name would summon their fury. A few whispered of negotiation, of finding humanity and bowing before it before war came. The vote fractured. No decision was made, but the galaxy beyond the chamber did not wait. 3 new scout groups had already been sent. Against orders. Brave captains, greedy captains, foolish captains, it did not matter. They all vanished. One transmission returned, cut short by screams. It showed the black shape of a Terran vessel sliding past, massive and scarred. No fire came from it. No weapon glow, only silence. Yet when the scouts' engines roared to run, they simply died, one after another. As though the ship had decided they should, the last word in the transmission, observed. Then static, in the markets, people whispered. If the humans are alive, do they come as healers or destroyers? In the barracks, soldiers asked, how do you fight a fleet that does not fire back and still kills you? In the schools, children painted the Terran symbol on walls until teachers scraped it away. But the children painted again, brighter, bolder, and across the stars one phrase began to spread. The myths are awake. At the edge of the galaxy in the system of Yaren, a listening post caught something new. Not the soft whisper of distress, not the cold question of identify. This was different, stronger, closer. A single broadcast, heavy and sharp, filled the night. This is Terran Medical Command. We were attacked. We remember. The post fell silent. Its crew fled their stations. and above the barren rock they had called home, a colossal shadow drifted slowly, deliberately. Blotting out the stars, the galaxy now knew humanity was not a myth. It was a memory sharpened into a blade, and the blade had begun to turn. The galaxy had lived for centuries under the illusion of safety. The Galactic Council ruled by words, that empires fought by fleets, and the stars themselves seemed loyal to the banners that hung above them. But myths have teeth, and when myths move, even stone remembers how to fear now. The myths moved. It began with silence on the trade lanes. The Syrian convoy, 50 ships long, had departed from the Kelmar Ring with full holds and steady escorts. They were meant to bring food, weapons, and machines to the Midrim colonies. They were strong-armed and secure. Convoys of that size did not simply vanish, yet one by one, their signals went dark. At first, traders assumed pirates. Then, perhaps, a collapsed star had bent their route. But then a single transmission came through, jagged and broken. The kind of message that burns itself into history, because no one can forget the tone of a dying voice. The words belonged to his Syrian escort, Captain. His eyes were wide, his scales pale with terror. Behind him, in the trembling frame of the recording, stars bent and warped around a single mass too large to name. His voice cracked. Not pirates, not council lied to us, they're real. The screen filled with shadow. Metal darker than night slid across the stars, etched with scars, built from shapes no alien mind would have designed. Hull plates as thick as mountains. Lights glowing not from beauty but from function. Engines that did not roar, they whispered like predators. They did not need to be loud. The transmission ended with a single word, Terran. The convoy never arrived. The Galactic Council tried to seal the message, but it was too late. Traitors carried it in their memory. Soldiers repeated it in the barracks. Children whispered it like a game. The word Terran became a knife in every conversation. Some said the ship was only a derelict, a ghost with no crew. Others argued it was alive, awake, and watching. And some insisted it was not alone. In the chamber of the council, Admiral Dravar, his iron rings clicking as he spoke, slammed his hand upon the table. One ship cannot haunt us. One ship cannot unmake empires. But the scholar from the promise shook her head. Her voice was steady. One ship was enough to silence a convoy of 50. How many more will wake? The chamber grew silent, while the council argued. Fleets still patrolled. In the Karastor belt, a small alien patrol ship drifted on routine watch. Its crew was young, untested, bored of silence. They had spent months scanning asteroids, reporting nothing, and dreaming of home. Then their scanners blinked red at first. They thought it was a planet moving where no planet belonged. Then the numbers corrected themselves, and the truth sank in. It was not a planet. It was a ship, the patrol captain. Ordered visual confirmation. The crew obeyed, and the stars filled with something that should not exist. The warship was larger than their home city, built in lines too sharp and too brutal to belong to the elegant fleets of the council. It carried scars like medals, entire sections of hull, plated over by repairs older than the empires themselves. And along its side, faint but burning, glowed the old Terran mark, the circle, the line. The 3 stars dot the patrol froze. The captain whispered, "Send word, now." But the ship moved, not fast, not in a rush. Slowly, with the calm of something that knew it did not need speed, and the patrol's engines died, one by one. Their lights went dark. Systems failed without reason. Screens turned to static. They were not destroyed. They were simply dismissed. The last thing the patrol crew saw was the Terran warship sliding past them, so close they could feel the gravity of its mass tug at their bones. Its lights did not blink. Its weapons did not fire. It simply went on into the dark. And when their systems flickered back to life, the ship was gone. The patrol's report was short, just 2 words: observed, survived. The report reached the council. It did not calm them. It broke them further. Some demanded immediate war. Arm the fleets. Strike the shadow before it grew teeth. Others begged for silence, warning that to attack a legend was to invite extinction, and a few quiet, but steady, urged diplomacy. If humans had spared the patrol, perhaps they still sought peace, though perhaps their oath remained true. But in the markets, no one believed peace. Traders spoke of the convoy swallowed whole. Citizens remembered the images of burning mercy ships. Soldiers dreamed of shadows in the sky. The galaxy had seen its first Terran warship, and no one forgot the size of it. On the far rim, beyond the Council's reach, a pirate fleet watched the stars. They had heard the whispers. They had seen the footage. They thought themselves clever, hungry. Ready to test the myth? They followed a faint, distress signal into the void. They found silence, and then their captain laughed when the shadow appeared. Because he thought it was only one ship, he laughed until the second shadow rose behind it, and the third. And as the fleet's laughter died, single broadcast filled their decks, sharp as broken glass. You said one ship. You were wrong. The pirates screamed as the void filled with Terran light. The galaxy had seen shadows. It had seen whispers. It had watched ships vanish into silence and convoys disappear without a trace. The galaxy had not yet heard the humans speak. Now they would. It started as a ripple across every frequency. Traders heard it in their coms. Miners heard it echoing in their helmets. Soldiers heard it in their barracks. And children heard it while they played. At first it was static, rough and broken. Came a pattern, steady, sharp, deliberate. 3 pulses, a pause. 3 more. Old signal code. Ancient military rhythm. On Relay 19, Varel felt his chest tighten. He knew what was coming. He'd lived with whispers for weeks, studied fragments, watched shadows. But this was no fragment. This was something alive. The static cleared. A voice filled the stars, not the weak, broken distress calls, not the hushed. Identify that it haunted council chambers. This was something different. Strong, cold, carved in iron. You said we were myths. The words echoed across systems. Ships paused mid-flight. Fleets froze, mid-maneuver. The council chamber itself went silent as the words poured into their stones, carrying a weight heavier than law. You called us fairy tales, forgotten, weak. On barren colonies, farmers dropped their tools. On warships, soldiers stopped their drills. In schools, children raised their heads and felt their hearts pound. Though they did not know why, the voice grew sharper. Remember our name? And then on every screen, the Terran symbol burned into life. The circle, the line, the 3 stars, not drawn, not painted, glowing etched in fire. The galaxy finally understood. Myths were not whispering anymore. They were speaking. In the council chamber, the delegates sat frozen. No one dared move as the symbol hovered in the air above them, blazing with steady light. Then the voice continued. This is Terran command. Our medical fleets were attacked. Our oath was broken by cowards who struck at healers. You destroyed our mercy ships. You killed the wounded and the weak. You thought silence meant death? The iron-ringed admiral rose halfway, then sat back down. His rings clicked against the table as his hands trembled. The voice thundered on. Silence does not mean death. Silence means waiting, and we have waited long enough. Every system carried the message. Every outpost. Every world. No firewall could block it. No jammer could silence it. Even ships that had been in dead drift lit up as the broadcast forced itself through their decks. We are Terran command, where the oath you broke. We do not fire on the helpless. We do not strike first, but we remember, and we are awake. Chamber broke into chaos the instant the broadcast ended. Some screamed for war. Strike now before they rise in full.
Oh.
Others shouted for surrender. They will burn us all if we defy them. And a few whispered, shaken, perhaps they still follow their oath. Perhaps they seek only justice, not conquest. The Chancellor raised his gavel but did not strike it down. Even he could feel that the Council's law no longer ruled the room. The Terran voice had replaced it. One delegate from the minor worlds. whispered what many thought but did not dare to say. We are not the rulers of the galaxy anymore. Reports flooded in faster than the Council could read them. Merchant fleets vanishing without combat reports, patrol squadrons drifting home with their weapons intact, but their engines burned out, systems waking to find massive Terran ships, floating silently in orbit, never firing, never speaking, just watching. On the outer rim, a captured video showed something more. A Terran fleet. Not one ship, not two, dozens. They moved with precision, like predators circling. Their hulls bore scars so deep, they looked older than the empires themselves. Their weapons glowed with an energy no scientist could name, and at their center, a single massive carrier larger than any known ship broadcast the same message again and again. Terran command has returned. Citizens across the core worlds rioted, some burned banners of the Council, screaming that their leaders had lied. Others painted the Terran symbol on their walls, chanting the word human with voices full of awe and terror. Markets crashed, fleets mobilized without orders. Generals argued with admirals while soldiers whispered of shadows they had seen. Above their homes, fear spread faster than any fleet could travel. In a quiet chamber, the scholar from the Promise stood before the Chancellor. Her eyes burned with both fear and hope. They do not lie, she said. Humans are back, but remember what the old oaths said. They fight to protect. They fight when attacked. If we move first, we doom ourselves. The Chancellor's whiskers twitched, and if we wait, then we live or die by how much mercy still survives in them. Far beyond the Council's reach, in the broken Yarn system. Terran fleet drifted like wolves around a wounded moon. A single broadcast pulsed again, louder than before. You broke the oath. You will answer. And then, for the first time, in millennia, the galaxy saw what Terran weapons could do. The fleet did not fire at armies. It did not strike at ships, turned its weapons on the empty void, and tore a starfield apart. Space itself bent. Its planet shook. Planet shook. It was not a battle. It was a message. The myths had returned. The command had spoken. The galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy had heard the whispers. It had seen the shadows. It had listened to the voice of Terran command roll like thunder across every system. But still, many believed the humans would not strike. That illusion ended in the Carathon blockade. The blockade was meant to be unbreakable. 500 warships, drawn from the proudest fleets of the Galactic Council, stood shoulder to shoulder. Across the Carathon trade route, their hulls glimmered in polished steel and colored banners. Their admirals sat confident in high chairs, certain that history bent to their fleets. They had come not to fight, but to intimidate. The Council wanted to show strength, to tell the galaxy that it still ruled, that Terran myths could be frightened away like shadows. But shadows do not fear light. The crews were restless. Some whispered about the footage from Yaren of the Terran fleet tearing a starfield apart without firing at an enemy. Others scoffed, insisting it was trickery. The admiral of the blockade, a tall Vey with pale skin and sharp teeth, dismissed the fear with a wave. We are 500, he said. The Terrans may be 1 or 10. If they show themselves, we will erase them. If they hide, then they are cowards. The words had barely left his mouth when the void shifted. Not an alarm, not a warning. Just a silence so sudden, the crews stopped breathing. Then the stars bent. At first it looked like a planet-sized shadow rolling across the void. Then engines flared, faint, blue, and deadly quiet. A single Terran warship slid into view, larger than anything the blockade had ever seen. Its hull bore ancient scars, its weapons glowed with cold light, and its mark burned like fire across its side. The crews panicked. One ship. The Vey admiral roared. One ship dares our blockade. Fire at will. The blockade lit up. Hundreds of cannons spat plasma, beams, torpedoes, storms of light so thick they turned night into day. Every shot slammed into the Terran warship. Explosions rippled across its hull. Fire danced along its plates. The void shook with the sound of war, and then the flames cleared. The Terran warship was still there, unbroken, unmoved. Its shields burned gold. The alien crews fell silent. The Vey Admiral's teeth clicked. In fear, he screamed again, "Fire! All ships! Fire everything!" They obeyed. They fired until weapons overheated, until reactor cores screamed, until their own hulls shook with exhaustion. The Terran warship remained, and then at last it answered. It began with a hum, deep and low, like the growl of a predator waking. The Terran warship's spine lit with fire. A single cannon fired. Just one. The beam tore through 3 Council cruisers as though they were glass. It carved a hole in the blockade, splitting ships apart with a single shot. Then the second cannon fired. And the third, the void erupted. Council ships exploded in waves of fire. Battleships twisted apart like toys. Destroyers split in half, their crews screaming into the silence of space. Fighters tried to swarm, but their engines failed before they reached the Terran hull. The warship did not rush. It fired with calm precision, every shot tearing another piece from the blockade. Within minutes, 100 ships were gone. Within an hour, 200 more, the survivors broke formation, fleeing into the void. But the Terran warship did not chase. It simply advanced, slow and steady, as though the blockade were nothing more than mist. The battle's recording spread before the smoke even cleared. Traders broadcasted. Soldiers replayed it again and again, whispering in fear. The Council had promised the galaxy safety. It had promised 500 ships could hold back a myth. Now the galaxy saw the truth. 500 ships could not hold back even one Terran warship. On Council worlds, riots grew. Citizens screamed that their leaders had lied. Their posts. Admirals locked themselves in silence, unable to explain the footage. The Chancellor stood alone in his chamber, the gavel heavy in his hand. His whiskers shook as he whispered, "We cannot fight this." As the blockade burned, the Terran warship transmitted. The voice was steady, cold. "You broke the oath. You fired on healers. You thought numbers would save you." The camera feed showed the Council's proud fleet reduced to wreckage, flames drifting in the void. Numbers mean nothing. The warship turned its guns away from the survivors. It did not finish them. It did not need to. Mercy itself was more terrifying than slaughter. The message ended with a final line. "Remember this. We are Terran Command. And this is only the beginning." The blockade was gone. The Council's power cracked. Entire systems whispered of surrender. Others whispered of rebellion, but one truth drowned out all others. Humanity had shown its fire, and the galaxy now knew the cost of underestimating a myth. On the far rim, in the ruins of a dead world, more shadows stirred. Not one warship. Not 10. Hundreds. They rose from the dust, engines lighting after centuries of silence. Their hulls bore the mark of Earth, glowing like stars, and above them all, a single colossal ship, so vast it dwarfed even the warship at Carathon, slowly lifted from its tomb. Its broadcast echoed across the stars. Cold and final, the fleet is awake. The Council chamber had been carved from stone older than empires. Its walls rose high, lined with banners that told stories of victories, treaties, and long-standing laws. For centuries, voices inside this chamber had decided the fate of stars. But when the humans returned, the chamber became only an echoing tomb. It began with silence, not the silence of debate, not the silence of respect, the silence of terror. Above the Council's own capital world, something vast moved in orbit. Its shadow cut across the seas and cities below. Its mass bent. The light of the system's sun, its weapons glowed cold and patient. A Terran warship, not hidden in distant void, not whispered about in reports, not caught on shaky footage. Here above them, every citizen could see it. Every soldier, every worker, every child looked to the sky and saw the shape blotting out stars. No broadcast was needed. The ship's presence was louder than any voice. In the chamber, delegates sat frozen in their seats, staring up at the holographic projection of the warship as it drifted over their world. Then the voice came. "Galactic Council," it said. "You broke the oath." The walls of the chamber shook as though the words themselves carried weight. The sound was not transmitted through speakers. It lived in the stone, in the air, in their bones. You struck at healers. You killed the helpless. You thought silence meant death? But silence means waiting. Delegates whispered, argued, shouted in panic. The Chancellor raised his gavel, but did not strike it, because no law could silence the Terran voice. "You are observed," the voice said. "You are judged." Then silence fell again. But the silence was worse than the words, because the warship remained. For hours the chamber dissolved into shouting. Some demanded fleets be summoned at once. "We cannot bow to myths." Begged for surrender. If they wished to kill us, we would already be ash. Admirals claimed it was a bluff, a single ship. But then a new report shattered their lie. At the edge of the system, dozens more Terran ships were detected, drifting. In calm formation, the iron-ringed admiral pounded the table until his knuckles bled. "We are not prey. If we kneel, we are nothing." The scholar from the Promise rose, her voice trembling but steady. "If you fight, you are nothing faster." Her words silenced even the shouting. Outside the chamber, fear spread like fire. Citizens filled the streets, staring upward at the colossal shadow in the sky. Shops closed. Ships refused to launch. Families huddled in their homes, waiting for a firestorm that never came. Some painted the Terran mark on their walls, praying it would protect them. Others cursed the Council, blaming them for awakening the humans' wrath, and everywhere the same whisper grew. "The myths are here." Days passed. The warship never fired. It never moved from orbit. It simply remained silent and patient. Predator that did not need to strike because its presence was enough. The Council debated endlessly. Should they send envoys? Should they offer tribute? Every time they leaned toward war, a new report arrived. Fleets vanishing in deep space. Colonies reporting Terran ships hovering above them, never firing, never. Leaving everywhere. Humans were present, and nowhere could they be stopped. The scholar stood again before the Chancellor. Her eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. "They have not fired," she said. "Not here, not yet." That means something. It means they remember their oath. They do not strike first. They wait to see if we are still the monsters who broke their peace. The Chancellor's whiskers trembled. "And if we are, then we burn." The iron-ringed admiral snapped at last. "We cannot sit under their shadow. We must show strength. One decisive strike, and they will learn fear." He rallied a handful of delegates. Against orders, he launched a fleet from the capital docks. 200 ships, sleek and proud, rising toward the Terran warship like sparks rising toward a storm cloud. The citizens below watched in terror. The council chamber shook with arguments, and above the Terran warship stirred. Its engines glowed. Its weapons lit. The fleet closed in, weapons armed. The first volley of alien fire lanced out, striking the Terran shields in brilliant flashes. The Terran warship did not move. Then it answered. One cannon fired. A single beam tore through 50 ships, their wreckage scattering across orbit like broken toys. Another cannon fired. Another 50 gone. The fleet broke instantly. Survivors scattered, fleeing in panic. But the Terran warship did not chase. It did not finish them. It turned its weapons away, back toward the empty void, and then it went silent again. A final broadcast cut through every frequency, reaching every world, every ship, every citizen. Strike again, and we erase you. Obey the oath, and you live. The message ended. The warship drifted in silence. The chamber collapsed into chaos. The delegates shouted over one another. Some demanded peace at any cost. Others demanded escape, fleeing to worlds far from Terran. Presence. The Chancellor sat slumped in his chair, the gavel heavy in his hand. For centuries, the Council's word had been law. Now its law was meaningless, because above them, one Terran warship held more power than 500 worlds. The Council was broken. On the far rim, in the ruins of a forgotten system, Terran fleets gathered. Hundreds of ships, thousands. Their engines glowed with cold fire as they aligned into perfect formation, and at their center, colossal supercarrier stirred. Its voice cut through the dark. Terran command prepares. Judgment begins. The galaxy trembled. The Council was broken. Their laws were ash, their fleets humiliated, their pride shattered. But broken pride is dangerous, and fear breeds desperate choices. The humans had warned, "Strike again, and we erase you." The Council struck anyway. It began with fire on the edge of the Shiran cluster. The alien empire there, proud and ancient, decided they would not live under Terran shadows. They gathered their strength, 300 warships, dozens of carriers, entire flotillas, armed with the latest weapons. They marched into the dark with banners raised, shouting that humans were only ghosts wrapped in old metal. The galaxy watched. Citizens crowded into halls and taverns to stare at the live feed. Council leaders held their breath. If the Shiran won, perhaps myths would die again. The fleet entered the system of Terran 5. The world was barren. It's nothing but rock and storms. But something waited there. The void shifted. Engines glowed like distant stars. Shadows moved. And then, out of the storm, a Terran fleet emerged. Not one warship, not 10, hundreds. Their hulls glowed with the scars of 1,000 battles. Their formation was perfect. A wall of steel and fire. At their center, a colossal supercarrier drifted. Its mark shining brighter than the suns themselves. The Shiran admiral laughed. "Old ships," he said, "scrap metal, fire at will." The void lit up with alien weapons, plasma, torpedoes, beams. An ocean of fire hurled at the Terran line. The humans did not move. The fire washed over them, bursts of light, explosions tearing across the shields, and when the storm cleared, the Terran fleet was still there, unbroken, unshaken. Then Terran command spoke. "You broke the oath again. Judgment begins." The supercarrier's cannons lit. It started with a single pulse, a golden beam that ripped through a Shiran battleship, slicing it apart as if it were paper. Then came the second beam. The third. The fourth, the Terran fleet erupted. Weapons older. Then the Council's empires thundered into life. Missiles streaked across the void, tearing through cruisers with impossible precision. Rail cannons punched holes through carriers, sending fragments spinning into the dark. The humans did not waste shots. Every beam, every blast, every strike was deliberate. Calm, inevitable. Shiran ships burned in hundreds. Crews screamed into the comes begging for retreat, begging for mercy. But retreat meant nothing. The Terran fleet did not chase, simply erased whatever stood before it. Within the first hour, half the Shiran fleet was gone. Then the second, 3/4 more. The survivors scattered, but their engines sputtered and died. Terran EMP waves silenced them mid-flight, leaving them to drift helplessly in the void. And still, the Terrans did not slaughter them. The supercarrier's voice thundered across the system. "Mercy is ours to give. You chose to fire. You live to carry fear home." Surviving ships were left adrift, powerless but alive. The message was clear. The humans did not fight for conquest. They fought to remind the galaxy that their patience had limits. News of the strike spread faster than any fleet. The galaxy saw the images, hundreds of Shiran warships burning in silence. Their wreckage drifting like a graveyard of pride. Saw the Terran fleet untouched, their formation unbroken, their cannons cooling in the dark. Citizens wept in the streets. Soldiers abandoned barracks. Entire colonies painted the Terran mark on their walls. Not in rebellion, but in worship. The Council tried to suppress the footage. It failed. Even their own citizens broadcasted in secret. Everywhere, the same whisper grew louder. The humans are not myths. The humans are judgment. Back in the chamber, the council dissolved into chaos. Delegates screamed for surrender. Others screamed for vengeance. The chancellor sat in silence, his gavel heavy, his eyes hollow. The iron-ringed admiral, his pride broken but not gone, snarled through bloodied teeth. They leave survivors. They humiliate us. That is worse than death. If we bow, we are nothing. The scholar from the promise rose once more. Her voice shook with fury. Nothing is better than ash. Do you not understand? We spare you because you still have a chance. To live, they do not want your empire. They do not want your thrones. They want you to stop being monsters. Her voice carried across the chamber. But pride is stubborn. The council could not agree. And outside, Terran fleets grew bolder. Reports arrived of human warships drifting above major council worlds. Not firing, not speaking, just watching. They hovered like silent judges, their hulls glowing faintly. There, marks visible even through the clouds. Citizens trembled beneath their shadows. Children pointed at them with awe. Adults looked away in shame. The galaxy had learned to live under banners. Now, it learned to live under shadows. At the height of panic, the Terran fleet broadcast once more. This was the reckoning strike. This was warning. We carry memory of every mercy ship you destroyed. We carry names of every wounded you killed. Strike. Again, and there will be no survivors. Strike again, and your stars will go dark. The broadcast ended. The galaxy froze in the dark, beyond the Council's maps. Terran command gathered again. This time it was not hundreds, it was thousands. An entire wall of warships rose from forgotten shipyards buried in dust and silence. Their engines lit like dawn. Their weapons glowed with fire older than empires. And at their center, the colossal supercarrier's voice whispered one last promise. Next we end it. The galaxy trembled. The council prayed. The humans prepared. The galaxy had seen the reckoning strike. Hundreds of warships erased in hours, thousands of survivors left drifting in silence. The message was clear. Humanity was awake. Humanity was angry. Humanity would not be ignored, but the galaxy had not yet seen the end. It began in silence. On the core world of Valor, the seat of the council, citizens looked to the skies every day and saw the shadow of a Terran warship. It hovered without, firing, its mark glowing faintly against the black. Children whispered about it in alleys. Soldiers refused to meet its gaze. Leaders pretended it was not there then. One morning, the skies grew darker. More shadows appeared. Not one ship. Not 10. Dozens. Then hundreds. Terran warships poured into orbit, blotting out the sun, their formation perfect, their weapons silent. The city below froze. Traffic halted. Crowds filled the streets. No one moved, no one spoke. The air itself seemed to shiver. In the council chamber, alarms blared. Delegates rushed to their seats. Admirals screamed orders. The chancellor sat pale, his whiskers trembling, and then the voice came. It did not come from speakers. It did not come from translators. It came from the stone of the chamber itself, deep and heavy, as if the planet itself had decided to speak. Called us myths. The delegates froze. You called us gone, forgotten, weak. The sound rolled through their bones, but myths do not return. Legends do. The banners on the chamber walls trembled. The council members looked up as though the ceiling itself might collapse. The voice continued. This is Terran command. You broke the oath. You struck at healers. You slaughtered the helpless. You thought silence meant death. You were wrong. The council chamber shook. And then, on every screen across the galaxy, the projection changed. Citizens saw not just the council world, but every major system. Terran fleets hovered in orbit above them all. No system was untouched. No world was spared their shadow. Everywhere. The humans had come. The chancellor tried to speak, his voice thin, his gavel trembling in his hand. We are willing to negotiate. The Terran voice thundered, cutting him off. There is no negotiation. There is truth. The chamber went silent. Truth is this. You are alive because we choose it. You are safe because we restrain ourselves. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. But we do not forget. Strike at us again, and you will cease to exist. Resist, and your stars will go dark. Obey the oath, and you live. The word spread across every world, every station, every fleet. There was no place where the message did not reach. The council broke. Some delegates fell to their knees, begging for mercy. Others screamed in anger, demanding resistance. Admirals wept, their rings clattering against the tables. The chancellor dropped his gavel, struck the stone floor, and split in two. For centuries, the council's word had ruled the galaxy. Now its symbol of law lay broken and still above their heads. The Terran fleet remained on mining colonies. Workers stopped their drills and stared at the sky, whispering the word human. On farming worlds, children painted the Terran mark on walls, bright and bold, no longer afraid to be caught. On military bases, soldiers laid down their weapons, knowing they would mean nothing against the shadow of a Terran ship. And in the pirate dens and smuggler ports of the Outer Rim, even the most ruthless criminals swore never to fire on a medical vessel again. The oath was no longer law. It was survival in the council chamber. The scholar from the promise rose. Her voice carried over the chaos, clear and strong. Do you see? This is not conquest. This is not empire. They do not need your thrones. They do not want your banners. They only demand one thing, that you never again strike at those who cannot fight. That you never again break the oath of mercy. Our eyes swept the chamber. They are not myths. They are not fairy tales. They are truth. And truth does not ask permission to exist. Then, just as suddenly as they had come, the Terran fleets began to move, not in retreat, not in fear, but with the calm of predators who had made their point. One by one, the warships slid from orbit, their engines lit like dawn. Their hulls glowed with the mark of Earth. They did not fire, did not destroy. They simply left, vanishing in two. The void, leaving the galaxy trembling in silence. But everyone knew they could return at any moment. And that truth was more powerful than any weapon. In the weeks that followed, the council struggled to rebuild order, but their power was gone. Citizens no longer feared them. They feared and respected the humans. Whispers turned into chants. Chants turned into stories. And stories turned into legends. The humans returned. The humans spoke. The humans judged. Across the galaxy, the Terran mark became more than a symbol. It became a warning, a promise, truth carved into the stars. On the far rim, deep in the ruins of a shattered system, the colossal Terran supercarrier drifted in silence. Its engines dimmed. Its weapons cooled. Its voice whispered only to its own fleet. The oath is restored. The galaxy remembers. For now, we sleep. The fleet vanished into the dark. But the legend remained, and the galaxy knew one thing above all. Humans were not myths. They were the truth of legends.